Hello everyone. Has this ever happened to you? It's Friday night, and you've sat down for some commander, and staring you down from across the table is a powerful and centralizing commander filling you with dread. But no matter how many times it seems to be removed, it doesn't seem to answer the problem. If that's the case, this may be the solution for you. I started playing Magic in 2009, and Commander shortly after it first became popular around 2011, and I firmly believe that these 4 cards, Song of the Dryads, Imprisoned in the Moon, Oubliette, and Darksteel Mutation, are the best Commander removal cards currently available. Now, the keen among you may have noticed I said Commander removal and not removal in Commander. There is a substantial difference. However, these 4 cards, because Red doesn't seem to get one, have the task of permanently removing an opposing commander without moving zones, and avoiding giving your opponent the ability to redeploy them by simply paying the commander tax. This option should not be ignored. If your opponents are playing any mid-range value deck, or any sort of deck with the commander at the core of their strategy, it becomes much easier to hold off those value piles without becoming completely overwhelmed. With that being said, they do have some downsides. Being sorcery speed removal, unless you play a flash deck, is a real drawback and won't save you in a situation where instant speed removal is required. But I know you're a good Magic player, so I know you're not playing a subpar amount of removal in your decks. They are, like other spells in Magic the Gathering, susceptible to counter magic and enchantment removal, but that's like saying a creature is bad because it dies to Doomblade. They do, however, have to worry about your opponents giving their commander Hexproof, Shroud, or Ward, since they aren't at instant speed, meaning you will have to deal with that first before casting these spells on them. If you need help with this, Glaring Spotlight is a colorless artifact for 1 mana that can do just that. And Nowhere to Run is available in black and also doubles as a removal spell on its own. The last issue I want to briefly touch on is with Darksteel Mutation and its cousins, like Witness Protection, Lignify, Kenrith's Transformation, and Unable to Scream. The biggest issue with the previously mentioned cards is that, aside from Darksteel Mutation, they can be destroyed in combat, but they can also be sacrificed to any outlet, which is the main reason why I played these 4 cards over the previously mentioned ones. Darksteel Mutation only really gets a pass because it grants indestructible and keeps it from being chumped away, but it is still susceptible to a sacrifice outlet. With that being said though, I don't really think that these are the worst downsides for what we're specifically trying to get out of these spells. So when we rank these spells under the scope of removing problematic commanders, number 1 would certainly go to Song of the Dryads, which is only in 2.2% of decks according to EDHREC. And while removing commanders is the main goal here, being able to remove any permanent type if you don't need to remove a commander is extremely strong. If your play groups are plagued by Field of the Dead or Glacial Chasm, it's a forest now. Are you having issues with Portal to Phyrexia, Doubling Season, or maybe even Impact Tremors? They are now a forest until, or even if, they can find the removal to get it back. And with Edge of Eternities coming, allowing for vehicles and the new spacecraft to be eligible commanders, this card takes care of that too before they're crewed or stationed. When your opponents build their deck around a singular pillar card, and let's be honest, a lot of commander players do that, knocking that pillar down causes a ripple effect throughout the game that they have to solve first before continuing to develop with it. Now, you may be hesitant to give your opponent an additional land and allowing them to go up 1 land, but that is much more preferable than giving them a land off of Path to Exile and letting them untap, play a land, and cast it again. Up next, we have Imprisoned in the Moon at the number 2 slot, and in 3.7% of decks that can use it, while not being able to hit every permanent type, it does still get the commander, which is what we're mostly concerned about. It can also get a Planeswalker or a land card. And while Planeswalkers aren't the most common card type in Commander, it can be worth using in some cases, but I tend to just use it on Atraxa instead, who usually helms these Super Friend decks. As previously stated, Path to Exile is in 47% of decks that can play it, and also has the downside of giving your opponent a land, but at least they won't just be recasting their commander and leaving you with a humongous feels bad moment. Up next, we have Oubliette at a shockingly low 0.9% of decks, which, fellow gatherers, if your objective takeaway from this video is dealing with annoying commanders, please consider picking this up. The only reason this card isn't at the second slot is because it only gets creatures and doesn't have the flexibility of the number 1 and number 2 positions. I'm not sure if people just aren't aware of this card, but at just under $2, the value of phasing out a commander until the end of time is very strong compared to the other cards which still leave a permanent on the battlefield. By not leaving a permanent behind, it dodges targeted removal, except for enchantment removal, and avoiding any sort of sacrifice game plan your opponent may be using, which should not be underestimated. Your opponent just has to sit there and watch as auras and equipment phase out with it, and they're treated as though they don't exist. And finally, we have Darksteel Mutation at... are you serious? 5.6% of decks? This is the highest usage out of these cards by far. I have been playing with this card since its release in 2013, and I can say that if you're one of the 5% of players using this card, please consider using the other ones on this list as well. Thank you. So, Darksteel Mutation does manage to accomplish the task of turning your opponent's commander into a fly on the wall, but it can still be disrupted by blinking the creature, being sacrificed, or for some reason putting it on a Voltron commander, which I know you wouldn't do unless you absolutely had to because you're a pro gamer. Like I had mentioned earlier, the only real saving grace is the indestructible this card grants, which keeps it around as a chump blocker, but that seems much better than the alternative of letting your opponent's value engine pop off. It's also worth noting that red doesn't seem to get an effect like this. What would that even look like? My idea is randomly picking a number between 1 and 3 to reassign the power to, and then maybe giving it haste, can't be blocked, and has to attack each turn if able. That seems like a red enchantment to me, but what do you think? If you have any ideas on how to make a red version of this, what would yours look like? Commander, for the most part, is a very casual experience, and I'm not saying you need to play these cards to hose your opponent's entire game plan and ruin their fun. But I am saying that if your local groups have some archetypes that you have trouble keeping up with or are becoming overwhelmed by, then these will definitely help you in the long run. At 2 and mostly 3 mana, for these effects, I feel they're at a pretty good rate similar to cards like Path to Exile, Chaos Warp, Generous Gift, and Beast Within, with what we're trying to accomplish. If you aren't playing any of these cards or are on the fence about them, I would highly encourage you to give them a shot in your local playgroups and see how they go. But that's all I have for you today. What did you think? Do you agree with the placement of these cards? Have you ever used them? Is this list objectively wrong because they aren't instant speed removal? Let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next one.